The studio felt unusually bright as Charlize Theron walked out onto the view set, the applause swelling the moment she appeared. She moved with her characteristic composure, offering a gracious smile to the audience and a warm greeting to the hosts as she took her seat. The atmosphere, at least on the surface, was friendly and expectant. Charlize had always carried herself with a kind of grounded elegance, measured, thoughtful, unshaken by noise, and the audience seemed ready for an engaging, intelligent conversation. Joy Behar opened with humor, tossing out a light remark about Charlize's reputation for playing powerful, uncompromising characters. Charlize laughed softly, acknowledging that strength had become a recurring theme in her work, but quickly pivoted to talking about the nuance behind those roles. She spoke about choosing projects that challenged her, stories that reflected complexity rather than neat resolutions. Her voice was calm, steady, and assured, and the panel nodded along, clearly engaged. As the conversation flowed, Charlize discussed her latest film, emphasizing collaboration and the importance of creative responsibility. She talked about using her platform to support causes she believed in, not as a performance, but as an extension of her values. Her words were careful, not rehearsed, and she spoke with the ease of someone used to navigating difficult conversations without escalating them. Joy listened with a half smile, occasionally interjecting with quips that drew polite laughter. At first, the exchange felt balanced, friendly sparring, nothing more. But then Joy tilted her head slightly and reframed the discussion. She brought up the idea of celebrity activism, joking that Hollywood often discovered moral urgency right around awards season. The audience laughed, but the comment carried an edge. Charlize smiled, though it was noticeably tighter than before. She responded calmly, saying that consistency mattered more than visibility, and that much of the work she supported happened far from cameras. She explained that activism wasn't a trend for her, it was a long-term commitment, often unglamorous and largely unseen. Her tone remained even, respectful. Joy wasn't satisfied. She leaned in, pushing the point further, suggesting that celebrities sometimes underestimated how their statements affected people outside their circles. The studio quieted slightly. Charlize nodded, acknowledging that influence came with responsibility, and agreed that listening was essential. She said she welcomed criticism when it was rooted in dialogue rather than dismissal. That was when Joy interrupted her mid-sentence. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just a quick interjection, brushing past Charlize's point with a remark that reframed it into something simpler, and sharper. The interruption landed heavier than it sounded. Charlize stopped speaking. For a brief moment, she simply looked at Joy, her expression unreadable. The pause stretched just long enough for the audience to sense that something had shifted. Charlize inhaled slowly. When she spoke again, her voice was still controlled, but firmer now. She said she was trying to answer honestly and that being cut off undermined the very listening Joy had just emphasized. The words were polite, but the message was unmistakable. Joy waved it off lightly, making a joke about time constraints and lively discussion. A few scattered laughs followed, but the energy had changed. Charlize straightened in her chair, her shoulders squaring. She said she understood television moved fast, but that reducing complex conversations into soundbites did a disservice to everyone watching. The audience murmured, uncertain but attentive. Joy countered again, this time more directly, suggesting that sometimes celebrities wanted credit for good intentions without fully engaging with opposing viewpoints. The comment landed like a challenge. Charlize's smile vanished completely. She looked down for a moment, gathering herself, then looked back up, eyes steady and unblinking. She said she had spent years engaging with opposing viewpoints, often privately, often without praise, and that it was frustrating to have those efforts dismissed with a joke. Her voice rose slightly, not in volume but in intensity. She emphasized that disagreement wasn't the problem, being talked over was. Joy tried to interject again, but Charlize continued, her composure beginning to crack at the edges. She said she was tired of conversations where women were expected to remain pleasant while defending their integrity. The studio went silent. Even the hosts beside Joy shifted in their seats, sensing how close the exchange was to boiling over. Charlize's hands tightened together on the table. She spoke about how often women in public life were labeled emotional the moment they asserted boundaries. She said she wasn't angry, she was frustrated, and there was a difference. Her voice wavered just slightly, enough to reveal how personal the moment had become. Joy responded defensively, insisting she was just asking questions and that no offense was intended. But the damage was done. Charlize shook her head slowly, saying intent didn't erase impact. She said conversations couldn't move forward if one side controlled when the other was allowed to finish a thought. When the show returned from commercial, the air in the studio felt heavier, as if the pause had allowed the tension to settle rather than dissipate. The applause was hesitant this time, scattered and unsure, and it faded more quickly than usual. Charlize Theron sat forward in her chair now, elbows near the table, hands loosely clasped but visibly tense. The polished calm she'd arrived with was gone, replaced by something more raw and immediate. Joy Behar adjusted in her seat, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Whoopi Goldberg opened her mouth to reset the tone, but before she could steer the conversation, Joy spoke first. She made a light comment, trying to frame the earlier exchange as spirited debate, insisting that strong opinions were the backbone of the show. The joke landed poorly. A few nervous chuckles echoed from the audience, but most remained silent, watching Charlize closely. Charlize didn't smile. She took a breath and spoke before the moment slipped away. Her voice was steady, but the restraint in it was palpable, like a dam holding back years of accumulated frustration. She said she welcomed debate, truly welcomed it, but what she didn't accept was being talked over or reduced to a caricature mid-sentence. She explained that these moments weren't isolated, that they echoed a familiar pattern she'd experienced repeatedly in public spaces. Joy lifted her hand slightly, as if to interrupt or clarify, but Charlize raised a finger, not aggressively, just enough to ask for space. The audience gasped softly. Charlize continued, saying that she wasn't reacting to one comment, but to the larger expectation that women should absorb interruption and dismissal gracefully, then be criticized when they finally pushed back. Joy's expression hardened. She responded defensively, saying she treated everyone the same and that no one was being silenced. She insisted that sharp questions were part of her job and that guests needed to be prepared for that. Her tone was firm, but there was an edge to it now, a crack in the confidence. Charlize nodded slowly, then said that preparedness wasn't the issue. Respect was. She said she'd spent years preparing for difficult conversations. But preparation didn't mean accepting disrespect as the price of participation. Her voice wavered for just a moment, betraying how personal the issue had become, before she steadied herself again. The audience erupted into applause, louder and more unified than before. The sound seemed to catch Joy off guard. She glanced toward Whoopi, then back at Charlize, her posture stiffening. Whoopi tried to interject, acknowledging the complexity of the discussion and emphasizing the importance of listening on all sides. Her tone was calming, but the moment had already crossed into something uncontainable. Charlize leaned back slightly, then forward again, as if deciding whether to continue. She said she didn't come on the show looking for conflict. She came to talk about her work and the values behind it. But she wasn't willing to sit quietly while her intentions were questioned in bad faith or her words reshaped before she'd finished speaking. She said that walking away from moments like this often felt easier, but also felt like surrender. Joy shook her head, muttering that she felt unfairly accused. She said passion didn't equal disrespect and that emotions were running too high. But her words were drowned out by another wave of applause, this one unmistakably supportive of Charlize. The studio felt divided now, not between guest and host, but between old rhythms in a moment that refused to be smoothed over. Charlize stood. The movement was unhurried, deliberate. Chairs shifted. The applause grew louder, filling the space with a kind of emotional release. Charlize thanked Whoopi and the other hosts for the invitation, her tone polite but distant. When she turned toward Joy, she paused for half a second, then said she hoped future conversations could make room for listening, not just challenging. There was no anger in her voice now, just finality. She stepped away from the table, the cameras following her for a few seconds longer than usual. Joy remained seated, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Whoopi called after Charlize, thanking her again and acknowledging the intensity of the discussion. The words felt inadequate, but they were all that could be said. As Charlize disappeared behind the curtain, the applause continued, sustained and emotional. Some audience members stood, others looked stunned, processing what they'd just witnessed. The producers' voices crackled faintly through studio headsets as the show struggled to regain its footing. Joy sat back, exhaling sharply. For a brief moment, she looked less like a seasoned television veteran and more like someone caught off guard by the force of a boundary being drawn live on air. Whoopi turned to the camera, transitioning awkwardly to the next segment, but the energy never fully recovered.